What's going on, guys? Welcome to Does No Really Mean No? Today our topics are going to be informed consent, and our special guest is Tony Prats.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm glad to be here on the podcast.
We're glad you can make it. Now, today's topic, you may be asking, what is informed consent? Well, Tony, could you explain what it is?
Well, Google defines informed consent as permission granted in the knowledge of the possible consequences, typically that which is given by a patient to a doctor for treatment, with full knowledge of the risks and benefits. So I'm sure some of you are still a little confused by that, because it's a little confusing.
Yeah, I was a little confused at first. A good example of informed consent is a cancer patient giving a doctor permission or consent to give them chemotherapy. Now, chemotherapy can be very dangerous, but there are certain benefits to the treatment. It is the patient's decision to choose chemotherapy as a treatment or an alternative once presented all the facts.
Another example is participating in a study or experiment that could be risky, knowing very well what the consequences could be. Sometimes scientists can keep or withhold information from people or just flat out lie to convince people to take part in their study.
That brings us to our next topic. An even better example is the Tuskegee syphilis studies. These were studies in which approximately 400 African American men were unknowingly given the syphilis virus. They were completely unaware of the possible risks, and many of them died.
Man, that's fucking that's insane. How could something like that even happen? When did this study start?
It started in 1932 and went on for 40 years until 1972.
Wow, how could such a horrible study go on for 40 years? That's insane.
It is. Only 74 of the original 400 subjects survived the experiment.
This study alone should show how huge an issue informed consent can be. Somebody could understand the loss of life, and they could understand why they died if they knew all the facts and knew what this could do for the scientific community. But then again, these people weren't given any knowledge of what was happening, and they literally were just given this horrible virus that just killed them. So yikes.
I agree. Dangerous experiments should be restricted to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Well, one could argue the importance of the Tuskegee syphilis studies. They did give important research on syphilis to the scientific community.
Yeah, but what about
the loss of life? Yeah, but let's be real here. If they did know what was going on, this study would be completely valid and wouldn't have such a huge historical prominence. And, this sort of reminds me of another tragedy. This other thing regards informed consent a little bit. It's along the lines, but it's not too similar. Have you heard of the Nuremberg trials?
I don't think so. What were they?
Well, in Nuremberg, Germany, during World War I, there were these German Nazi scientists, and they did these, insanely horrible things to Jews, and it was just horrible.
Well, wow. What kinds of things did they do?
Well, a good example is they would stitch people together, so they could create Siamese twins.
What, bro? Yo, what?
That's not funny. Yeah, they would stitch people together. Exactly. They killed a lot of Jews for their cruel, inhumane experiments.
What happened to the scientists?
Well, 12 of the 22 high-ranking Nazis were sentenced to death.
This human experimentation is a huge issue. I'm surprised how much information there is concerning informed consent.
Well, tell me about it, bro. Tell me about it. Can we get a little moment of silence for the lives that were lost in the Tuskegee syphilis studies and the experimentations that occurred in Nuremberg, Germany?
Okay, that's all the time we have for our show today. Thank you for listening, and bye. So